What's up, peeps? Yeah, I'm back already. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, Zang? Oh, first one. Good job. Who else is here? I can do shout outs. I got about another minute. Yeah, I know Ben Dixon too, but like I'm gonna talk about him a little bit, but like Ben Dixon is not really that important in the grand scheme of life, so I don't like making him more important than what he is. But don't worry, we gonna talk about him too. Yeah, Captain Obvious. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that. People have been coming out of the woodwork, it seems, and I'm gonna tell you why it's interesting to me that now they care. They care enough to attack Jimmy when before a lot of these people wouldn't even mention his name. Appreciate it. Thank you, John Castillo. All right, so if you all can share this while I put my game face on, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
This episode has been brought to you by JustNForm.com. If you're tired of being censored, tired of having your data stolen and sold, go to JustNForm.com, a social media site where all voices are welcome.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa, and I am, as always, your humble host, Niko House. I would like to welcome you all to join us on Roku. We are the very first and only independent news network on Roku. So we would love for you all to join the family, and that is definitely a better way to ensure that you're getting your updates when you're supposed to, that you're actually seeing what's going on, because YouTube suppresses. We all know this. They censor. We all know this. They shut us down. And if YouTube, for whatever reason, shuts us down for telling the truth, then, everybody would like for us to have an alternative so you can see your favorite journalists. So what's the best way to do that? The best way for you to do that is to go to Roku. That way you can continue to still support your journalists through viewership. Want to give a special shout out to our patrons on Patreon as usual. You are the reason that this show is allowed to continue to grow as much as we have been and as much as we will continue to do. So if you have not, you can join us on Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/mikasesukasa, or just click on the link in the description below. Also, if you are on YouTube, don't forget, if you want to have your comments read for all of the world and for Roku to see, you can just drop a super chat and we will go ahead and give you a shout out. $1, $100, doesn't matter. We'll still give you a shout out. It's all good. So, want to go ahead and get started. Oh man, y'all, I'm so irritated by the establishment. Now, obviously, you all know I cover the establishment a lot. I cover the conversations that have taken place between different media personalities. And that's because, for me, this wasn't a job that I chose. It was like kind of got pushed into it. And I got pushed into it because politics wasn't how I paid my bills, like Sam Seder and David Pakman, and like what Ben Dixon is trying to do, but is epically failing at. But politics wasn't paying my bills. Politics didn't get me famous, or at the time. In fact, it made me more so infamous because everybody thought I was lying about the corruption within the Hillary Clinton campaign. until it came out that it was true. So clearly that it wasn't the fame. I care because I know what lesser of two evils equates to in the long run. I do this because I know that if you lie enough to the public, you can convince the world that Bill Clinton is the first black president because he played a saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. You can convince the world that Obama deserved the Nobel Peace Prize if you allow the lies to persist and not call out the hypocrisy within media. I defend Jimmy and Tim Black and a lot of my colleagues. Not because we're friends or because we're colleagues or because we see things the same way, but because the David Pakmans and the Sam Seders of the world, they don't care about what happens to you or I or my family or yours. Because their checks have already been signed. Their platforms that they went to journalism school, right? They had people back them. Sam Seder used to work and still does. Less of a capacity, but he still works for MSNBC because he wanted to be a journalist. And he happened to get into politics. That's where the money was. So there's a difference. Tim Black left the type of radio he was doing to talk about politics because he couldn't stand the direction that our country was going in. Jimmy Dore, he still does comedy, but he shifted into more political comedy, in covering politics daily, going to Europe to call out the hypocrisy at these faux humanitarian conferences because he got tired of seeing what direction the country and the world was going in. So when I hear some of the stuff, like what you're about to hear, I can't help but do a video on it. Because it's like, it would literally burn me up inside if I didn't get to talk about it. So I figure I might as well talk about it on video. Because I'm sure somebody else feels the same way I do. Because I get infuriated when someone tries to take down a voice of truth. Not because they disagree with them. Not because they were factually untrue. But because it interferes with their money, with their interests, with their career growth, with their social climbing. So I want to show you all a video. We're going to discuss it. Take a look.
Let's go next to our caller from the I like that, most people in the state. Our caller from 317. Caller from the 317 area code. Who's this?
Hi, David. Is this me?
That is you.
Hi, David. This is Patrick calling from Indiana. So recently I was listening to a conversation between Sam Seder and Benjamin Dixon, and the substance of the conversation was what Sam described as the dumb left.
Right.
And more specifically, he was talking about Jimmy Dore and kind of Jimmy's, I would call it progressive purity test. And he had recently criticized Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie for not towing the progressive line enough. And just kind of on a broader scale, he kind of criticizes Democrats and liberals more than he would ever criticize a Republican, kind of using whataboutism and whatnot. And I think he basically just taps into the anger that some people feel on the left. And I kind of agree with Sam and Benjamin's point about that might turn off those people from even participating in the election, kind of furthering progressive ideals.
Yep.
So I just kind of wondered what your take on that whole situation was, and if you agreed.
I completely agree with Sam and Ben on this issue. I believe that the involvement of Jimmy Dore in politics has become completely toxic. I've cast a wider net in terms of that toxic element of the left, and I don't know that this is the right characterization, but you might remember me previously talking about what I describe as the Leninist left of Vladimir Lenin, Leninist. And I don't think it's really fair to group Jimmy Dore under that, but there is this contingent of the left that by virtue of a combination of, as you point out, whataboutism, so-called progressive purity tests, and a whole bunch of other mechanisms that I've described, they end up being useful idiots. And I want to be clear, calling them idiots it's not an ad hominem. Useful idiot is a specific sort of political term that has, basically it means you are unknowingly becoming a tool furthering the objectives of those who you either don't realize you're furthering the objectives of, or those you would on paper believe you're on opposite sides. I think that it's become completely toxic. I know that there are people in our audience who are fans of all combinations of these shows, but I think it is absolutely, brutally, completely counterproductive to everything that progressives are actually working for. I believe it is not pragmatic. I believe it is ideologically misguided, and that's where I am. So on that issue, I'm with Sam and Ben 100%.
And if I have a little bit more time, I was wondering if you maybe felt the same way about, say, a guy like Glenn Greenwald, who's a pretty big Russia skeptic and all that. And
I don't know.
Listen,
I'm going to be honest. I only am tangentially aware of what any of these people are actually doing day to day. So my opinion is based on, sitting down and saying, let me look at a sampling of the last 3 months of what they've done. And they may be doing things every day that don't fall under this. I've seen less of Greenwald's stuff than I've seen of Jimmy Dore's. Like, I've actually seen more of Jimmy Dore's clips, and more so than his clips, I've seen a lot of analyses of his clips where pieces of his clips are played. And so with Greenwald, I would be less able to say for sure. But from what I saw in One Democracy Now! Appearance that he did, he seemed to be totally whitewashing any possible Russian interference or anything of it. Anything involving Russia in a way that seemed extraordinarily and generously exculpatory of Trump and his cronies, in a way that seems very disconnected from the evidence on the ground.
Whoa, we're not even going to look. We're not even going to touch the last thing that David talked about right there. I had to play that part because I thought y'all would find that hilarious. Because David Pakman is the biggest Russiagate guy ever when it comes to YouTube. Like, him and Sam Seder, they just relish in the idea that Russiagate could be real because it gives them something to talk about when it comes to Trump every single day, because they actually don't have any legitimate analyses. Now, unlike David Pakman, like Sam Seder, although I don't have to watch their day-to-day stuff anymore because I actually gave them a chance. I gave many people a chance before the election and after the election. And I saw how the opinions change. And for some people, they believe that the litmus test is like David. He always says, I voted for Bernie Sanders. I'm a progressive. Yeah, you're a YouTube political star. Pretty much, if you didn't support Bernie Sanders and you weren't supporting Trump and you were on YouTube, your audience would be dead. You don't have, I know how the game goes, Dave. So that whole I voted for Bernie, ergo I'm a progressive, doesn't fly. You're not progressive. You're not. Because progressivism implies that you're trying to make progress, not merely resist a situation that you have directly or indirectly put us in. So you're not a progressive. And so this whataboutism that David Pakman is talking about when it comes to Jimmy Dore, and not only Jimmy Dore, because this is what I discuss. This is what many people discuss. Whataboutism. What the hell? Yeah, why would you vote for Andrew Cuomo? What about all the things he said about the progressive left? What about the fact that he is not going to pass Medicare for all? What about the fact that he is corrupt as hell? What about what he said about you? Those aren't things that... Whataboutism? That's a... What's wrong with the whataboutism in that regard? I don't get... is there a thing? What's wrong with whataboutism? What about your values? What about your morality? What about the mandate that you're going to need to get anything done in Congress because you're a 28-year-old junior, will be a 28-year-old junior congresswoman in an establishment that wants to eat you alive from both sides, and therefore the progressive mandate that you will need from the independent world, as much as you will need it from the mainstream world, is important, and you shouldn't ruin it. What about that? Is that not an important whataboutism? I mean, I'm curious, Dave, because, you know, he's one of those that likes to pontificate from behind his desk about how much more he knows about politics that he's never been involved in. What about that, Dave? Just curious. He proceeds to call Jimmy Dore toxic to politics. And I take that personally because, well, I mean, obviously, I like Jimmy. I like his analysis. I don't even have to 100% agree with Jimmy to know where his heart is at and to know that Jimmy isn't bought off. Because I've seen Jimmy actively stand up to those in his network who have been bought off. So I don't have to question where his loyalties lie. And nor does Jimmy pretend to be like a know-it-all in politics. He always says, he calls himself a jag-off comedian. But I've also seen Jimmy develop his analysis over the last 2 years. I've seen Jimmy become more and more and more educated and invite more and more people onto his show and more different types of opinion and give exposure to candidates who otherwise would have gotten no exposure, no donations, and would have never been able to make a legitimate run in their races. I've seen him bring on Abby Martin to actually tell us what's really going on in Venezuela, while all you do is talk about Russia and Trump and Russia and Trump and Russia and Trump and Russia and Trump. It would almost make me believe that you have in elementary school, when you like a girl or a boy and you push them in the sandbox and you keep bugging them every day at recess, call them ugly, say they got cooties, but you actually like them. That's like pretty much the relationship between the mainstream media and Donald Trump, because he gets them ratings, he gets them money. Because otherwise they would be boring. Literally, nobody would care what they have to say. And David Pakman is no different in that regard. He loves Trump. He loves this presidency. David Pakman, amongst many others, would prefer if Trump won again. The Natural Progressive says Jimmy is right. There is nothing wrong with him calling out people on the left. I agree with him. And I'm glad you brought that up, because he does call people on the left. And the guy who called in clearly doesn't watch Jimmy's show, because he calls out people on the right all the time. He has entire episodes dedicated to Donald Trump, dedicated to what Trump is doing in Syria, Venezuela. He had Tulsi Gabbard on to critique exactly how Donald Trump and his administration is literally aiding Al Qaeda right now in Syria. So that's a lie. That's a lie. That is literally a lie. All these ad hominem attacks from David Pakman and Sam Seder and Ben Dixon, I know who he is, but I know most of you don't, because he's really not that important. He really wants to be, though. He really, really does. This is his primary source. He really wants to be part of the establishment. The problem with Ben Dixon and his desire to be part of the establishment is that he's fucking boring. Trust me, I'm black. I know they like co-opting us, because the stereotype is we're charismatic and we can rally black people around black issues and make everything about black versus white and black versus this and black male versus white male, black male versus white. Instead of realizing that, yes, the issues that we deal with are very real, but women deal with their issues. And also, people are getting bombed in Yemen. So that's probably something we should be discussing. Things like that. So, clearly I'm not the one they would try to co-opt, but neither is Ben, because he's neither charismatic nor does he have a legitimate command of the issues that he's discussing. Not enough to fool anybody into believing that he actually is correct. So he's unuseful, and therefore he is bitter. And so is David Pakman. He is bitter. And so is Sam Seder, who is also bitter. Why? Because after they told lie after lie after lie after lie after lie involving Russiagate, involving Seth Rich, involving Donald Trump, involving Hillary Clinton, involving every single establishment talking point from 2015 on to this point, Jimmy Dore had an opposite reaction. As their subscriptions and their viewership went down tremendously, Jimmy became more popular. People wanted to hear Jimmy speak. Jimmy can have live shows because he doesn't have to script. Like live, he does like live stream sessions, but I'm going to his show in Burbank actually next week because his show isn't scripted. Jimmy speaks from the heart because he's genuine, and he speaks from a place of being educated and reading up on these issues, and he speaks from compassion and empathy for those who do not have a voice to speak up. Yeah, he gets passionate, but the fact that you can so apathetically pretend that Jimmy is the quote unquote useful idiot in that larger section of the left, that they're the useful idiots, do you not understand the irony in that statement? Well, for one, you didn't even factually explain after you start off with, no, this isn't an ad hominem attack. This isn't an ad hominem attack, but they're idiots. And he says that we're useful, but doesn't actually understand that you are literally the definition of the useful idiot that you try to accuse Jimmy Dore of being. Because when all you do is talk about Donald Trump, and this is people, by the way, because I've worked in politics, still do, behind the scenes stuff. When you've been involved, when you've been at the table, when you've been trying to affect change, when you've been an organizer, when you've worked for campaigns, like myself and a couple of others, or on the other side of that fence, it isn't only about the official involvement, but when you're like Jimmy and you've been to events, when you are an activist, not I'm going to chill behind this desk, count these racks, and complain about how Donald Trump is still in office and not actually do anything to effectively remove the person that I don't want in office. When you don't, Jimmy's literally in Europe right now exposing people. What is Sam Seder doing right now? Complaining, probably, about Jimmy, probably. He always brings him up. What is David Pakman doing? What is Ben Dixon doing right now? Jimmy is advocating for human rights right now for people around the world who don't have a voice. That's a useful idiot. So not the guy who, because he's not involved in politics, because he's not really an activist, because he doesn't travel his state, let alone the country, let alone the world, like Jimmy Dore or Tim Black or myself or other activists who got involved in this not because it was a job, not because it could propel us or uplift us. In fact, at the time, we all thought when we got involved in this and took the stances that we took, that it would hurt us. And it does in some ways. But you're not involved. You have no idea how politics works. So it would make sense that you don't understand how you're a useful idiot, David. So I'm going to go ahead and explain this to you. You do understand that despite what we would like to think, and I covered this in February, and everybody said I was a Trump supporter because, well, I'm very fortunate enough to have people in Washington that pass me information from time to time. And one poll that they passed me said, yeah, Trump's approval rating is higher than what many people think, like close to 60%, especially when it comes to the economy. And the Dems are at such a low approval rating that they had to keep pushing different insider polls until they got the result they want, just so they can release the modest version of what was going on. Real quick, Cool Blue said, I tuned out of David Pakman after he smeared Jill Stein. Yeah, I remember that. He's an idiot. He said, I knew right then that he was a fraud. Abso-freaking-lutely. Absolutely. But David doesn't realize, like, the realities that we live in. They push, because he complains about, well, he's a useful idiot because he's inadvertently playing into the plans or the schemes of the right, but either you're purposely doing it or inadvertently playing into the schemes of the right. Also, because Russiagate isn't working. I did a video on this last week actually, but I've done videos about this forever because I'm on the ground. I talk to people. I talk to candidates. I've canvassed. I know what people want to talk about, and it ain't Russiagate. It's like, why is the media lying to me? That's a popular topic that we have. Medicare for all. Things like that. Trump doesn't affect the day-to-day as much as David Pakman likes to make people think. He can, he has, but not nowhere near as much as the establishment tools that David Pakman is constantly ignoring. All David Pakman talks about, actually, is the right. Did you hear it? Anybody who subscribed to him, has he called out Andrew Cuomo for attacking progressives? I mean, has he? But if you are a progressive, wouldn't you want to speak up for progressives who pass progressive policies that Andrew Cuomo would never pass? And if you don't speak up with the massive platform that you have, wouldn't that make you a useful idiot? So also, pushing for a Green Party, which is something that Jimmy Dore does. Not a Green Party, a new party, third parties, which I think everybody in their right mind should be an advocate of. Because more options makes democracy work better, right? I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Granted, I oftentimes discuss that party politics is totally irrelevant until we fix our election justice or election injustice system. Still believe that. But we kill two birds with one stone. Jimmy Dore believes that the idea that the party is being taken over by progressives is false. And although our revolution has had substantive victories, a lot of those are at the local level. Only a few are in the national conversation. A few. But here's the problem with that. Once again, Pakman wouldn't know. Seder wouldn't know because they say that they're involved in politics, but it just means they're complaining about it. But there are these things called state democratic parties. The DNC too, but state democratic parties. They have delegates who make rules. They have executives in their parties that make rules, that decide whether or not a candidate will even have a chance to win, if a candidate will get to maintain their office. If they do win, you might win and you decide if you're going to advocate for Medicare for all. How many Justice Democrats do you think have a delegate role in the Michigan State Democratic Party or the New York Democratic Party? How many Our Revolution candidates, and this is not to slam Our Revolution, I'm just trying to make a point here. How many Our Revolution candidates do you think are delegates, executive directors, vice chairs, chair people, president, whatever, of their Democratic parties in their states? So if you're not a delegate and you're not a director or on a board, how are you going to fix the rules that keep your progressive candidates from winning? If you can't fix the rules that keep your progressive candidates from winning, then you have a far less chance of actually being able to win. And therefore, you can't really take over a party that you don't have control of. Jimmy understands this to a degree, one degree or another. I understand this. And you don't. Neither does Sam Seder. The point is that You are a useful idiot. You are the useful idiot that you accuse Jimmy Dore of being, and others like him, which I have no problem being considered in the Jimmy Dore camp. I don't have a problem with that. I'm going to tell you exactly what the problem is. You're jealous of Jimmy. That's like, you don't care about what happens to us. You don't care about what happens to the everyday people. You don't care about Medicare for all. I don't remember the last time you talked about it. Not that your videos come across my timeline as much anymore. The moment that the 2016 election ended, you switched sides to keep talking about Trump, and it worked for a little bit, but then your numbers started slowing down because you became victim of the same censorship that we all became victim to. The problem is that you helped perpetuate it by towing that establishment line. Whether directly or indirectly, you helped to perpetuate that. Ben Dixon, same thing. Nowhere near as popular, but whatever. Sam Seder, same thing. Sam Seder admitted that he would be more than willing to lie as long as it benefits his side, especially when it comes to Russiagate. And despite your willingness to sell out over and over again, Jimmy and others like him, but the topic is Jimmy right now, have grown more and more popular every single day. And whereas before you would just get praise upon praise upon praise heaped on you because you were able to fool people into believing that you were for us or for them, that you were about the truth, that you were progressive. You don't get that anymore. I've seen your comment sections. I've seen other people's comment sections. I've seen my comment sections. They don't like you. They don't trust you. And you know that this new wave of honesty, truth, and objectivity outside, irrespective of the duopoly, is coming. Actually, I'd say it's here. Cool Blue 71 says, I live in Michigan. Late 2016, state Democratic Party prevented Bernie Sanders primaries voters from getting their foot in the door. As another example of how you take over a Democratic Party and the fact that it does not necessarily start nor finish with just getting one or two candidates elected to Congress. Those congressional candidates don't have any control over the party unless they are big donors or they have big donors. But yeah, you're just jealous, bro. Like, you did not go on to explain in any way, form, or fashion. By the way, neither did Ben Dixon when I challenged him because he tried to call Jimmy a sheepdog for white supremacists. I said, where's that happened at? Because I remember he was using Tucker Carlson as an example because Jimmy said that Tucker Carlson was right for what he said about Syria. And he was. But Jimmy also critiques Tucker Carlson often. More often than he celebrates him. That's for sure. So when I asked Ben Dixon to provide factual proof of what he was saying, of course, he blocked me. What a surprise. David Pakman, after saying that he was not ad hominem attacking Jimmy, he was not doing that. Why would he do something like that? Then when he gives his explanation, he literally had no factual statement to make. He didn't say Jimmy was wrong. He didn't say Jimmy was dishonest. He didn't say Jimmy was factually incorrect. He didn't say any of that. He just said that Jimmy's toxic because of these purity tests, like Medicare for all. And can you not be for bombing other countries? Oh, damn, Dave. Shit, I guess we're just too pure for your progressive movement then, I guess. Why? What purity test? What? Jimmy's purity test is Medicare for all, ending wars, election integrity. If those three things are not part of your purity test, oh, big money out of politics. If those 3 things are not part of your purity test, you're not a progressive. That's like let me make this, that's bare minimum. That's bare minimum progressive values. That's not even talking about federal jobs guarantee and things of that nature. But hey, purity tests are really bad. Let's address, he was more concerned because the conversation was about Ocasio and Cuomo. Sam Seder, Ben Dixon, Jimmy Dore, and others were more concerned about Jimmy doing his job as an objective journalist, holding AOC accountable for her words, because ultimately, if you care, I feel like you should hold her accountable, because she needs to know how the actual progressive left feels about the things that she has said. And that people with influence are picking up on this. And if we are uneasy about the things that she's saying, we're going to tell people. That's how you make sure a candidate knows what's going on. You don't leave them in the dark. You want to leave her in the dark so she thinks that's the right strategy. But they were more concerned about him doing his objective duty as a journalist, and rather than being concerned with the fact that Andrew Cuomo probably just got away with stealing an election, that Andrew Cuomo literally attacked Ocasio personally and the progressive left. They weren't really concerned about that. Hey, question for you. Have either Sam Seder, Ben Dixon, or Jimmy Dore fought back actively against the networks that they represent, whether it be Ring of Fire, MSNBC, etc.? Have they ever actually fought back against the very network that's currently employing them to say you were wrong? Until you have facts, you are doing a disservice to the left, and you are hurting us, not helping us. Do Sam Seder and Ben Dixon and Dave Pakman, do they have audiences from all sides? Or just the left, the neoliberal left? Because I tend to believe the person who has an audience from all sides, like a Joe Rogan or a Jimmy Dore or Tim Black, myself, because we're not towing the establishment line. Cool Blue 71 said, let's call the fake progressives, the Democratic Party establishment, and others of their ilk, these 2 words, con artists, Sam Seder, Dave Pakman, etc. That's exactly what they are. They are con artists, and they get paid every step of the way. Believe that. But whenever push came to shove, whenever we were all of us, we were all faced with a choice. The establishment, Trump, or the truth. Jimmy Dore, pick the truth. Myself, I pick the truth. Tulsi Gabbard, pick the truth. Joe Rogan, pick the truth. Abby Martin, pick the truth. Tim Canova, you had the exact same options. Guess what you chose? With all of the security that you have, the entire network, the money behind you, the stability, like you were financially stable, all of you, except for Ben. And even though you had all of that, and claimed to be progressive, guess what you still chose to do? You still chose to side with the establishment. and it's not paying off as well as you thought it would. Because if they see what I see, and I know they do because they have analytics as well. I don't know if they're as good at predicting, but they have analytics as well. They have people who do that type of stuff. If you see what I see, you know, and I know, that your audience is limited. Neoliberalism is dying. Unfortunately, in that same regard, there is a rise in neoconservatism because you neoliberals are pissing people off. Beatrice Pierre said, watch Dave Pakman versus Ray McGovern on Russiagate. Will do. I'll make sure I do that. But neoliberalism is dying, and that's your only audience. Now, I'm sure when the election comes by, you'll go ahead and pretend to be progressive again. And guess what I'm going to do every step of the way? I'm going to say, yeah, that's correct. But you're full of shit, and I will never tell anybody to go see you for a valid opinion on anything. Ever. Because it's only about the numbers for you. It's only about the dollars. It's only about the next job, the next hot topic. You were never concerned about the people. You were never concerned about the truth. If you were concerned about the truth, there's no way that you in your right mind would objectively call Jimmy or anyone who thinks like him or agrees with him a useful idiot. If anything, he has brought so much truth and made so many people awake at this point that it really is shining a light on where the world is heading, which is they don't want you anymore. They don't want Ben Dixon. Well, they never wanted Ben Dixon. They don't want Sam Seder, who has, 500,000 subscribers or something like that, can barely get a video to get over 1,000 views unless he mentions Jimmy Dore. Because they don't want you. Jimmy sometimes has more views in a day than the entire TYT network. People want truth. Period. And so we're going to keep holding these liars accountable, just as we will hold Joyanne Reed accountable, just as we will hold Rachel Maddow accountable. We're going to keep holding the David Pakman, Sam Seder, TYTs, and specifically Anna Caspian. We're going to start. We keep everybody, because not only is it important to speak the truth when it comes to the issues, but it's also important to vet those who are claiming to be speaking truth also. So with that being said, people, thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure to join us on Roku. Shout out to everybody who gave a super chat, but you can also donate to us on www.patreon.com/mikasesukasa or clicking the link in the description below. And don't forget to join us on JustNForm.com. Come be part of the social media revolution, because JustNForm is indeed a social media website where all voices and opinions are welcome. With that being said, remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.